Mr. Speaker, every so often, there is a cry from members in our community for the introduction of Black studies or African studies in our schools. It comes as no surprise that with the recent protests at home and abroad and over ongoing racial injustices, this perennial cry has resurfaced. In response, Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise to share with my honorable information about the Bermuda and Global Studies strand of the social studies curriculum that is currently taught in our public schools at the primary, middle, and senior school levels. Mr. Speaker, we are all aware that the majority of Bermuda's population is of African descent, and it cannot be denied that the journey and struggle of Black Bermudians has defined significant aspects of. It is therefore appropriate that I provide my honorable colleagues and the country with information pertaining to the social studies curriculum in our public schools, and particularly the strand which focuses on Bermuda and global studies. Let me emphasize that the work carried out by the Department of Education, inclusive of curriculum, is guided by Plan 2022, the strategic plan for public school education. This is the pathway the department has been on since January 2018 and will continue on until we achieve an education system that is transformative for all students. Mr. Speaker, our technical officers have this year focused their efforts on ensuring that the social studies curriculum is grounded in a Bermudian context. Officers have revised and introduced the Primary 1 curriculum with resources, activities, formative assessments, and outside learning, i.e. field trips, for all primary years P1 through P6. As the curriculum change focus with each year level, teachers at the primary level can center Bermuda's Black culture and history or use African culture references in the classrooms. Mr. Speaker, for children in primary 1 through 3, the emphasis is on learning about who they are, both individually and collectively. At primary 1, the family unit is central to the learning experience, and Afro-Caribbean and African references can be used to examine the family. At primary 2, children are exposed to their cultural origins, which include, but not exclusively, African and Caribbean. Young learners are exposed to food, music, cultural expressions, and economic activities of our various identities. Bermuda's culture and traditions, that is, our holidays, celebratory activity, and as well national and cultural symbols are taught in primary 3. Mr. Speaker, specifically, Black history is connected to cup match, the tradition of emancipation activities, and the gombe, a Black Bermudian cultural symbol that finds its origins in Africa, and having passed through the Caribbean, now has its own distinctive Bermudian appeal. Bermuda history continues at the upper school level with the teaching of geography, economics, and ethics taking center stage. Children learn about the island's discovery and in the context of the age of exploration, and our journey through the various global historical milestones, as well as the global connection to Bermuda's economic activity. Bermuda's Black history is interwoven throughout these historical narratives. Mr. Speaker, our technical officers are continuously reviewing the teaching resources and engaging in community partnerships around Bermuda history. This year, primary 4 students learned of the migratory experiences of Black Bermudians and how slavery developed in Bermuda during the 1600s. Primary 5 students deepened their knowledge of Bermuda's slave history, as well as the emancipation movement through Bermuda's own Mary Prince, who was pivotal in the anti-slavery movement and the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. Students learned about Sally Bassett, an icon in the slave revolt narrative. They also learned about the role of friendly societies played in advocating for and supporting newly emancipated Blacks. Icons such as Wesley L. Tucker and Roosevelt Brown are also introduced to students at this level. Mr. Speaker, the social studies curriculum also includes Bermuda's history of racial segregation, unfair work practices, and the nature of racial injustices, the struggle for reform, and these personalities who led this struggle. Hence, in primary 6, students learn of personalities and activists such as the Progressive Group, Dr. E.F. Gordon, Dr. Barbara Ball, Dame Lois Brown Evans, Sir John Swan, and their social political impact. They also learn about the Tuckerstown dispute and the social, political, and economic impact of the displacement of the Black Bermudian community. The social studies teaching resources explore the racialized climate of Bermuda in the 1960s and 70s and the parallel experiences of African Americans who form part of the African diaspora. Mr. Speaker, at the middle school level, the curriculum shifts from the local studies to global studies, featuring the Caribbean and ancient African kingdom. The curriculum during the past school year has seen the addition of Mansa Musa, who predated the transatlantic slave period, and the introduction of the African Diaspora Heritage Trail. At the senior school level, there is considerable flexibility on what is taught about Bermudian studies, but Bermuda studies is mandatory. With preserving our heritage and introduction to African courses offered as elective, the latter course provides a window for our senior students to see the African history outside the Middle Passage experience. Mr. Speaker, earlier I mentioned community partnerships. These partnerships have supported teaching and learning with the development of new resources and materials, helped to enhance the social studies curriculum, and supported professional development. The Bermuda National Trust, for example, produced an interactive history book on Black history and worked with the Department of Education to deliver remote learning for over 350 primary school students on topics such as from shipwreck to settler, from slavery to emancipation. Our partnership with the Bermuda National Museum resulted in the creation of the Transatlantic Slave Trade ebook for middle level 2 teachers and students, the development of a tourism ebook for the primary 6 teachers and students, and final editing of the Prudence Rebels Teachers Resource Guide. Mr. Speaker, we have several Bermudian professionals who have been a tremendous support to the Department of Education in providing professional development for teachers who deliver the social studies curriculum to our students. Thus, in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the professional services of Ms. Melody Van Putten, who delivered the development series for middle school teachers. Also, the Department of Education officer, Dr. Randall Tankard, made a presentation on Mansa Musa, while Mr. Glenn Fubler of Imagine Bermuda delivered transformative leadership workshops. Additionally, our middle school teachers further developed and enhanced their Bermudian Black history knowledge with the participation in bus tours organized by Titan Express, highlighting the history of Black female slaves, Sally Bassett and Mary Prince. Mr. Speaker, both Bermuda and Global Studies has been incorporated into the social studies curriculum for our public schools. Our children are receiving the history and culture of Black Bermudians and our African ancestry. We'll continue to review, revise, and enhance the curriculum so that our students have rich, relevant, rigorous, and authentic learning experiences grounded in their history and their heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.